Now that I've finished going through Rance 01 and 02, all that's left of the Rance remakes is Rance 03, The Fall of Leazas. Rance 03 came out in between 9 and 10, making this the second to last release in the Rance series. Because of that, it benefits from a lot of modern design choices, like having voice acting. That's right, Rance 03 is the first, last, and only Rance game to have voice acting. So don't get too used to it. Wait, did you really fucking think that Alisoft would be able to put in the resources to give Rance 10 voice acting? Hell no, there's too many words in that game. In the prior two videos I did for Rance 01 and 02, I played those remakes, then I went back and played the original afterwards. I opted to go for something different here and play the original first, 03 second for this video. I wanted to play an SRPG, which Rance 3 looked to be one. Despite this, I will be talking about the remake, Rance 03 first. Thank you to my supporters. If you like the video, consider subscribing or joining the Patreon. Link on screen and in the description. Because of the nature of talking about eroge, if you want to find an uncensored version of the video, you can only find it on Patreon. A point of contention I've seen with Rance translations is the use of the term fiend and archfiend. A lot of earlier translations done by fans originally used terms like demon and demon king instead, and a lot of people use and prefer those terms as that is what they were first exposed to when playing through these games for the first time. When Manga Gamer took up doing their own translations for these games, they opted to use the fiend terms. I get why they would want to change to using the fiend terms, as devils like Felice exist in the world, and devils and fiends are not the same thing. I feel like the reason why the change was made was to avoid confusion between using the term demons while devils exist, as those two words are often synonymous with each other. On the other hand, fiend doesn't sound nearly as threatening as demon, and archfiend isn't nearly as cool sounding as demon king. Why is this relevant? Why the hell am I even talking about fiends and archfiends, and what the fuck even are they? What makes Rance 03 very different from the previous two entries is that it doesn't take place in a single location. Rance 01 took place in Leazas' castle town, and Rance 02 focused on the town of Custom. Rance 03 instead expands the world of Rance, that being the world of the continent. Rance 03 has you explore through two regions of the continent, while also dealing with a third. That being exploring the free cities, a series of independent city-states, a little bit of the kingdom of Leazas, with the Empire of Helman as an invading threat. That's a large portion of the world map you're covering in this game. Rance 03 introduces and explores a lot of concepts that either didn't exist or barely existed in the prior two entries. There's a lot of talk about the continent's politics, like the struggle for Helman's throne, that played a cause in this game's primary conflict, the differences in climates and a bit of culture between Helman and Leazas, as well as the idea of level caps. I don't remember if 01 or 02 talked about level caps, and I know it didn't play a role in 01's gameplay, and I don't know if the party members you got in 02 had level caps, but level caps play a major role in 03's gameplay and story. The story part is a major spoiler for the final boss, so I'll skip over that, and I'll talk more on the gameplay later. But one of the major concepts that 03 introduces is the fiends. I'm just going to use whatever term matches the game I'm playing. 03 is using fiend, so I am too just for simplicity. Fiends exist on special rules that the average person can't fucking deal with. These motherfuckers operate using playground logic, where you try and swipe their shit, but they're all like, nah, I've got an invincible force field, you can't touch me. And you can't. These bitches, for all intents and purposes, are unkillable, and are also extremely powerful. The Archfiend is the king of all fiends. They might as well be a walking apocalypse. Good fucking luck if they're within a 100-mile radius. The only thing that can stop these fuckers is a special sword called Chaos. Between the Helman invasion of Leazas and fiends assisting in that invasion for their own secret reasons, shh, it's a secret, Leazas is fucked. Leah then sends Kanami to go find one of the biggest pieces of shit to exist in this world, Rance, and get his help to retrieve Chaos and free Leazas. Already we're hitting a new addition with 03, as there's an opening playable prologue as Kanami, where you are escaping Leazas as shit is going down. There's a lot that is added and changed in 03, mostly for the better, and this is one example of an addition that I like, as it flushes out the story and provides stakes for the players early on before you're given control of Rance. It's one thing for Kanami to show up at Rance's door and tell him that shit is fucked, and it's another, more impactful thing to play through and experience that to see how bad it is. Show don't tell and all that. But that's what Kanami does. She shows up at the Rance's door and is practically subject to his every whim while they try to go free Leazas. Rance kinda bumblefucks his way into a position of power as the head of the Liberation Army. Like, he absolutely does get shit done and uses some of his merit from the previous games to convince Maria, who was originally leading the resistance, to establish Rance as the leader. But he will also practically exploit their losing position that he finds them in when he first shows up to custom to get what he wants. And that is a major example of one of this game's focuses when it comes to the story, and that is that Rance is only ever an accidental hero. Everything that Rance does is always for selfish or horny reasons. He doesn't give a fuck about anything outside of himself, his dick, or an attractive woman that he will probably end up forcing himself on. That's the only reason he agreed to even help Leazas to begin with. He wants the reward money and to force himself on economy. That's why he agreed to help custom, because then he's given a reign to force himself on the girls in custom. The grand comedy of Rance is just that. He ultimately does do the heroic thing, but it's always an accident or byproduct of being a despicable asshole. Like, there are several scenes where Rance is planning out the army's next actions, and his decision is to just rush this shit because he's impatient. And Barris, a general from Leazas, falsely reads into Rance's actions as a master tactician, and that he's somehow operating on another level of thinking. No, he just gets lucky. Or whenever Rick Addison, a Leazas commander, is in the scene, he somehow comes out of it having more respect for him. Like, he tells Rick to go to the most dangerous section of a battle because Rance doesn't give a fuck if a guy dies. But then Rick thanks him because he loves fighting and thinks Rance did that because he cares. No, he's just a bastard. Rance 03 takes after Rance 01 when it comes to gameplay. Whereas the original Rance 3 presents itself as an SRPG, Rance 03 is nothing like that, opting for a more traditional style turn-based RPG with similar mechanics to 01, such as having attack cooldowns, while also using the dungeon crawling that was introduced in 01 as well. When it comes to 01, that game was going for a more of a gambling aesthetic, so it made sense that it used cards to represent explorable tiles. But Rance 03 drops the gambling aesthetic entirely, with the only holdover being that cards are still representative as tiles. There's a couple screenshots of early dev ideas, and in one of those you can see that the cards were considered to be dropped for more standard tiles, but I guess the cards were well liked with the devs and stuck around. That's fine, I think they're cool. Well, exploring the dungeon more or less works exactly the same way as it does in Rance 01. You click on one of the 3 tiles that are in front of you. I'd say that 03 is way less mean about its dungeon crawling compared to 01. The traps are way more manageable here. They're still around, but it feels like the frequency of them were toned down because it feels like I rarely encounter traps. Either that, or they were made to be a lot easier to avoid and navigate around. Even if I got hit by a trap that did damage to me, it felt more like a minor inconvenience with how relatively low damage it would do to my party compared to the run-ending damage it could do in 01. The biggest departure from 01 is the way combat and your skills work. Rather than a random assortment of bullshit that Rance finds, the attacks and skills you're able to equip all come from your party members. Each character has 4 skills that you're able to freely mix and match and equip and use in battle. You start the game with only 5 skill slots, and as you progress you're able to equip a maximum of 8. The character's skills equipped that makes them the active party member, meaning that they are subject of getting attacked as well as subject to getting experience. Benched characters unfortunately get left behind on the experience. Because of that, rather than go for specific synergies and builds, I opted to have as many active party members as possible to level as many characters up as I can. I don't know if this was intentional, but by the end of Rance 3, you'd end up having 8 active party members in battle, and in 03, if you equip 1 skill from each character, you can also end the game having 8 active party members. I think it's pretty cool that 03 mirrors that in a way, but you get a ton of characters in your party that you can use. This isn't even all of them even. There's like 1 or 2 characters I didn't even bother getting, and I sold 2 characters off to the brothel to get them the fuck out of my party. Holy shit, Jericho was useless as hell. Fucking regret even recruiting her. One of the best changes from 3 to 03 is that you actually get to use Maria in your party. She plays such an important role in the story, and the fact that you never got to use her in the original was a crime, and she was practically a permanent member of my party throughout this game. Bit of a side note, easily the worst change was the scene with the unicorn. In the original, she was just a gal monster type design, being basically humanoid. In 03, that got changed to her being a centaur. This resulted in the worst scene in the game. So bad, I won't even show it even censored, because then that means I have to see it. Where Horse Pussy takes up the left third of the screen. I want to see that shit. The fuck? Why not just keep her a gal monster? I literally held up my hand to block my view of the screen when that showed up. Fuck that, I hated that. Whereas I generally like this change in how skills work in 03, one aspect that I don't like is what happens when a party member dies. They get swapped out during the battle, which you only get a limited amount of swaps mid-battle, which is fine. What is less fine is that you don't get to choose anything about what swaps in. You don't get to choose to swap in an actually capable fighter, and instead might get fucking Jericho, the actually most useless character in this game. She has a level cap of fucking 6 to give some reference on how useless she is. So if she swaps in, that's a wasted swap because of RNG. Even if you get a swap with an actually good character, there's no control of what they swap in with. There was a point where she's gonna get swapped in with Maso, a buff for her next magic attack, and she didn't get swapped in with an attack, so all she could do was buff herself, and that was it. A wasted swap because of RNG. It would have been nice if I was able to choose. I'd say overall that I enjoyed the mechanical systems in 0-3 over 0-1. They're a lot more fun to play around with and to customize your party and attack loadout over 0-1. The dungeon crawling is a lot more fun than in 0-1, where it can be a lot more stressful or annoying every time you encounter a mystery card tile. And the biggest thing to me is that the level and money scaling is way more generous than it is in 0-1. A couple of times I felt myself being way too weak and that I couldn't progress because I just couldn't cut it. My numbers were too low and I had to grind some levels to juice up my stats or grind cash for better equipment. But not once did I ever feel that in 0-3. I did grind for like an hour in this game, but that was a choice I made for some optional content. I wanted to do an optional fight which required me to level up a little bit to unlock Shizuka's final ability. But not once was I ever in need or want when it came to the critical path of this game. I always found myself one level and by the end of the game I was drowning in money just by playing normally. Rance III is great. I really enjoyed playing it over the course of 26 hours. It was funny, it was fun, the challenge was somehow just right, which is hard as fuck to nail down in games. I appreciate the voice acting in this, and it's going to be weird moving on to other games that don't have that. It's a shame that Rance III ends on a to-be-continued cliffhanger for the 4th game, a game that will never see a remake. At least, I fucking doubt it ever will. But before even thinking about touching the next game in the Rance series, it's time to go back to the original version of Rance 3 to see what that game has to offer. As I've said, before I played through 0-3, I wanted to play through 3 beforehand. This is unlike the prior 2 videos in the 0 remakes, where I played the remake before the original. The biggest reason why is because I wanted to play an SRPG, which Rance 3 supposedly presents itself as. Issue is, Rance 3 fucking sucks. I hated my time playing it, and that is because I didn't play it. Rance 3 is similar to 0-3 as you go from town to town or dungeon doing shit. The dungeons are very standard top-down dungeon crawling. There is nothing exciting happening on the screen except the rare puzzle element and running towards the objective, what I describe as a viewport that's a little too zoomed in for my liking. I'd personally like to see more of my surroundings. Exploring sucks because the enemy encounter rate is fucking bonkers and is way too high. A couple steps, battle. A couple steps, battle. A couple steps, do you see the pattern? In the battle, you're on a grid with your party always on the right and the enemy party on the left. The field is always blank with no terrain or shit going on with it. Don't expect anything exciting with that. So you gain control, move Rance, maybe attack some bullshit if you're in range, then get confused as to why your party members are acting by themselves. The fuck is up with that? I'll tell you. You only control Rance. No one else. I don't know what the fuck was up with Alisoft in this era and having a fetish for only ever controlling Rance, but only being able to control a single character in your party in SRPG is insane. How the hell am I supposed to come up with strategies in this strategy game? I'll tell you, you don't. In fact, you don't even have to play as Rance either. At the start of a battle, you can give up control entirely and let the game play itself. What the fuck? Literally every battle, save for the 2 boss fights with no Sinjil that dropped the SRPG combat, can be played by itself. Even every other boss fight, and every other fight, you don't even need to bother. I think I only ever manually controlled like 6 fights throughout the 10-hour runtime before I realized the game would just play itself. Straight up, I'd put it on auto and do other shit while the game ran. I fucking folded and put away laundry during some of these battles. And do you want to know what the worst part is? You don't even recruit Maria into the party at any point. What a fucking mistake. Wait, no. What a fucking mistake of a game. So far, this 3rd entry of Rance has had the biggest ups and downs in the series so far. Rance 03 has been my favorite of the remake games by far. It's super solid. I think if you were the kind of person who didn't care about playing through every entry in a series to just say fuck it and not even bother with the other two and just start here. Yeah, there's a lot of callbacks and returning characters, but I don't think you'd be that lost if you did that. You just have to fill in some gaps, but those should be pretty easy to fill in. On the flip side, I hated Rance 3. That shit fucking sucked.